What would you do if you were finally confronted with your family's willful apathy? I'm Dre, and this is The Midnight Hour. Tonight, we're going to be reading from author Katherine Mansfield, and specifically her short story, The Garden Party. Now, The Garden Party is probably her most famous story from what I can gather, and an incredibly elegantly written one as well. It basically centers around a very well-off family named the Sheridans, who are putting on a party and inviting all of their most well-off guests and friends. And while everything is being prepared for this party, there comes news of a tragic death that has happened to a gentleman who lives down in the cottages at the bottom of the hill from the Sheridans' home. Now, these cottages really represent the other half, and they live a quite different lifestyle than our protagonists do in their quaint and beautiful home. Now, the Sheridans have a daughter named Laura, who begins to question and reflect on the family's decision to continue with the garden party, even though this news of the tragic death has broken out. She really represents the reader's conscience and their own questioning of why this is still taking place. Now, Laura questioning her family's decision of why this party is still going forward really irks them, really makes them uncomfortable, and puts them in a weird spot because they start questioning themselves, perhaps, even though it never actually says that in the story. So the party does go off without a hitch. Laura tries to put all of the tragic news behind her and in the back of her head, but all the while can't really get over the fact that they are just ignoring everything that is happening right outside their garden gates. At night's end, once all the guests have left, the family is left sitting in a empty marquee and just reminiscing on the evening that they had just had. Mr. Sheridan himself, the family's father, brings up the death and the news, and this makes Mrs. Sheridan think that the best possible thing to do would be to take down a basket full of the uneaten sweets and sandwiches and desserts down to the grieving family below in the cottages. So she sends Laura to do just that. Now, Laura makes this descent down into that part of the neighborhood, finds the right house, finds the right door, and all the while she is just miserable and thinking that everybody is looking at her and just judging her from her outfit, from her hat to her whole aura, I guess you could say. She knocks on the front door, is escorted into the bedroom where the deceased man now lays on the bed, and she can do nothing else but just have this moment of such deep self-reflection that she sobs out loud, and once she leaves the home, is met by her brother Lori in the street, who comes and holds her and embraces her while she just has this little moral reflective moment. And that's pretty much how the story ends. Now, it may seem like there's not a lot going on here plot-wise, but it is so deeply embedded with this idea of classism and what is elegant versus what is not, that it is so worth unpacking. And we're going to do just that right now. In the first section that we're going to be looking over is Laura getting ready for the party and just taking a step back and noticing how beautiful her surroundings really are. And we're going to read this section so that we can compare it to the second section that we're going to read. So this is the first, and I quote, "Laura put back the receiver, flung her arms over her head, took a deep breath, stretched, and let them fall. Huh, she sighed. And the moment after the sigh, she sat up quickly. She was still listening. All the doors in the house seemed to be open. The house was alive with soft, quick steps and running voices. The green baize door that led to the kitchen region swung open and shut with a muffled thud. And now there came a long, chuckling, absurd sound. It was the heavy piano being moved on its stiff casters. But the air, if you stopped to notice, was the air always like this? Little faint winds were playing chase, in and at the tops of the windows, out at the doors. And there were two tiny spots of sun, one on the ink pot, one on a silver photograph frame, playing too. Darling little spots, especially the one on the ink pot lid. It was quite warm, a warm little silver star. She could have kissed it. That right there goes to show you just how fortunate this family is and how beautifully innocent things are coming off to Laura in this moment. Now, this moment happens before the news of the tragic death. So she is still very elated at the promise of this garden party happening and just is filled with this childlike happiness. Now, the second part we're going to read really contrasts with the first, and that is when the kids reminisce on what the cottages down below really symbolize. And the second part goes, that really was extravagant. For the little cottages were in a lane to themselves at the very bottom of a steep rise that led up to the house. A broad road ran between. True, they were far too near. They were the greatest possible eyesore, and they had no right to be in that neighborhood at all. They were little mean dwellings painted a chocolate brown. In the garden patches, there was nothing but cabbage stalks, sick hens, and tomato cans. The very smoke coming out of their chimneys was poverty-stricken. Little rags and shreds of smoke, so unlike the great silvery plumes that uncurled from the Sheridans' chimneys. Washerwomen lived in the lane and sweeps and a cobbler, and a man whose house front was studded all over with minute bird cages. Children swarmed. When the Sheridans were little, they were forbidden to set foot there because of the revolting language and of what they might catch. But since they were grown up, Laura and Laurie on their prowls sometimes walked through. It was disgusting and sordid. They came out with a shudder, but still, one must go everywhere. One must see everything. So through they went. There you go. That's pretty much the two halves of this story's settings. We have the rich home of the Sheridans where everything is beautiful and sunspots are everywhere. And then we have this disgusting and sordid bunch of homes of these much poorer people who are just trying to live the same life that the Sheridans live, except in a very different way. So I just wanted to contrast those two sections and to really show the differences between those two settings. And it's especially interesting, the second quote, because of how Laura and her siblings view the cottages. They might not be as bad as they are describing right there. They probably aren't, but their vision of them is so tainted by probably their mom and their dad's lifestyles that they don't see anything else but their own views of it. So the third part we're going to be reading is when Laura enters the home of the widowed wife and their 6 little children who now are all mourning the death of their father. And this says, there lay a young man fast asleep, sleeping so soundly, so deeply, that he was far, far away from them both. Oh, so remote, so peaceful. He was dreaming. Never wake him up again. His head was sunk in the pillow. His eyes were closed. They were blind under the closed eyelids. He was given up to his dream. What did garden parties and baskets and lace frocks matter to him? He was far from all those things. He was wonderful, beautiful. While they were laughing and while the band was playing, this marvel had come to the lane. Happy, happy. All is well, said that sleeping face. This is just as it should be. I am content. But all the same, you had to cry, and she couldn't go out of the room without saying something to him. Laura gave a loud, childish sob. Forgive my hat, she said. Now, this may also come off as cold, but this is really where the division of these classes are for Laura. Laura is forced to go into this new world wearing this beautiful designer hat, and she feels out of place. She knows she's out of place, and that right there makes her relatable, because anybody would feel out of place, especially walking into such a somber setting and having to be so dressed up, coming from a garden party where you know that it shouldn't have gone off anyway. So those were the 3 sections that I thought really spoke to this story, and is very interesting when thinking of the initial question, what would you do if you were finally confronted with your family's willful apathy? I mean, Laura making her parents uncomfortable by asking, should we still have this party, is so telling. When you come from that lifestyle and you are forced with such a tragic piece of news like this person's passing, you don't want to think about it. You don't want to think about these deeper things when you have a garden party to tend to. So this kind of story really makes the reader sit back and reflect on perhaps their own ideas of class and their own ideas of mortality and what it means to be empathetic to someone who lives a completely different lifestyle than your own. So that was pretty much tonight's story in a nutshell. Like if you felt something, comment if you wrote something, and I will see you next time at the Midnight Hour.